Okay, so before you watch any more of this video, I want you to know what you're signing up for. And if you already know what you signed up for with this channel, great, you can skip ahead like about 30 seconds. But if you don't, hi, my name is Julianne. I do consider myself a minimalist, but I am not your typical minimalist. I am not making it my goal to own as few things as possible. I am making it my goal to only own what I need. And while that might not sound like a big difference, it makes a bit of a difference in that the tips that I'm about to talk about in this video are not going to be primarily about chasing an aesthetic. They're going to be about improving the functionality of your home. And when you implement these tips, your home, I believe, will look better, but it may not look like magazine perfect. And so if that is what you are chasing, I wish you the best success. But I'm not your girl. I don't have that figured out, and I am not trying to. But if you like the idea of improving the functionality of your home, then here are my 10 key minimalist practices for an organized home. Practice number 1, start small. If you're going to succeed at decluttering your entire home and practicing minimalism, you have to understand that it's a lifestyle, not like a one and done thing, not a quick fix. So with that in mind, instead of aiming big and dreaming big, I want you to start small. Don't start with a room, start with a part of a room. And when you get that specific part decluttered, celebrate. Practice number 2. Pay the most attention to the areas that you use the most. Listen, if mess bothers you, I am right there with you. A cluttered space can reflect a cluttered mind or keep us from focusing on the things that we want to focus on. It can stress us out. There's just like a lot of negatives that can come with having a messy and cluttered space or not being able to find our things. But you can't do it all at once. You're not Superman, you're not Superwoman. So one of the key practices that I found that helps is to focus on the areas where I'm spending the most time and or the areas that are bothering me the most, but those are usually the same places. You may not be able to keep your entire house clutter-free all the time, and in fact, you probably can't. And it's probably not realistic to expect of yourself, but you can focus on the areas that you see and use the most to keep everything at bay. Practice number 4, incorporate new minimalism practices, decluttering practices at your own speed. There are a lot of decluttering tips and tricks and hacks out there. If you're watching this video, my guess is that you watch a fair number of them. Same, actually. But something that can really intimidate us when we're watching a lot of minimalism and decluttering content is that we feel like we have to implement every single new idea at once. And that's just not the case. In fact, I give you full permission to not even implement all the ideas we're talking about in this video if that gets too overwhelming. I feel like I keep saying this over and over and over again, but you don't have to do everything at once. Start small, work slowly, and incorporate new things as you feel comfortable doing so. If you can stick with that plan, it will make your minimalism practice a lot more sustainable. Which brings me to practice number 4. When you notice something is getting messy and cluttered again, just pick yourself up and declutter again. I cannot tell you how many times I have looked at something that I've decluttered multiple times and I get discouraged because I just think, oh my word, will this never be perfectly decluttered? So I am coming at it from probably the very same perspective as you. But here's the deal. Our lives change, our needs change. We bring things into our homes, we take things out. And that is okay as seasons change for the types of things that we own to change. We just have to remember to not be too hard on ourselves or not to see like the number of things that we own as a static thing. We want to be always practicing decluttering, always evaluating when we have time and it doesn't stress us out too much, what we keep, what we get rid of, what there's a place for in our lives, what there isn't a place for. And it's not a big deal if it gets out of hand and you have to declutter something again or you have to keep decluttering. In fact, we should expect that we're going to have to keep decluttering because we can't realistically go the rest of our lives with only the amount of possessions that we own right now. We're going to be buying things, and when we are buying things, we're going to make mistakes. That's okay. We're going to get gifts that we don't want to keep. That's okay. Like all of those things are okay. Just pick ourselves up, declutter again, give ourselves some grace. Practice number 5, establish consistent ground rules to help you deal with overwhelm while decluttering and organizing. I've talked about some of these ground rules that I have for myself in other videos, and I'll link to them somewhere. But the thing here is you want to combat decision fatigue, which is a real thing when you are decluttering, as much as you can. So before you get started, before you're looking at specific things, I want you to think through some ground rules for yourself when decluttering. So for example, some of the ground rules that I use is if I have not used something in over a year, I get rid of it. 2, if it costs less than $20 to replace, I just get rid of it. And I'm not using it. Obviously, if it's something I use every day, I'm not just going to declutter it and then have to buy it the next day. I try to make sure that I am emotionally regulated. I think about it, and then I use some of these other tips, like I think about my container, or I think about the number of things that I have that are similar to that thing, and I either decide to keep or get rid of based on that thing. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into decluttering than that, but just think about what sorts of ground rules you can set for yourself that you feel comfortable keeping as you are decluttering, and write those down or remember those as you're going through so that you don't have to decide fresh with every single item you come across. Which relates to practice number 6, which is to streamline wherever you can. Now, there's a lot of different facets to this. Like, first of all, streamline wherever you can, because it is easier to keep your things organized if you just declutter the largest amount of things that you have, right? Like, the fewer things you have to organize, the easier it is to organize your stuff, the easier it is to stay organized, right? But this also refers to like your systems and your processes, right? If you have a really elaborate way that you do a certain thing, like maybe, how you get ready in the morning, or how you, cook meals, or how you do all of these things, try to streamline what you can. This may mean that you buy something to keep everything contained, or to like replace 2 or 3 things that you own and then you get rid of those things. That's fine. It may also just mean like, okay, hey, I am committed to having fewer things, having only the things that I need. So in this specific area, I want to have fewer options. I'm not saying that you have to get rid of like, your every single option in your life, but just think about what do you like having options for and where is it a burden, and streamline all the places that it's a burden. And you may actually find that as you practice minimalism more and more, that more of those options feel like burdens because you just love the simplicity of going with tried and true things. Speaking of systems and processes, practice number 7 is to make an organizing system that works for you and then let that system dictate how much you keep. So this is actually quite inspired by Dana K. White's container concept, where she talks about like how your house is a container, the rooms in your house are a container, different spaces in your house are a container, and you can only keep the number of things that fit in the container that they go in. So like you could consider your closet a container. You could consider like a drawer a container for certain things. You could consider a kitchen cupboard a container for certain types of things. But basically, my take on that is that you need to have an organizing system that works for you. You need to have the right things in the right places in your house. And you may not know what that is, and you don't have to figure that all out. Again, start small. But as you go, and as you're getting rid of things, and as you're moving things around and you're organizing them, you might think, wow, it would be really nice to have this type of thing in this space. Like it might be nice to have like all your candles in your office because that's when you enjoy burning them, right? For example, just any sort of random thing, right? When you have a system that works for you, things are where they need to be when you need them. Formalize that system, have a place that those things go, and then let that system determine what you keep and don't keep, what you have room for in your home. This helps you think more about functionality, again, like we were talking about at the beginning of the video, instead of aesthetics. And it also gives you a very not personal way of evaluating whether or not you have space for something. I cannot tell you how many times, I'm a sentimental person. I've talked about that many times on this channel. But I struggle sometimes to get rid of things because I feel like, it's very personally meaningful, or somebody's going to be hurt, or I'm letting down my future self or my past self or whatever by getting rid of something. And what I've had to do over and over and over again is either on my own or with my husband, design a system that works for our home, and then let that system sort of be like a third-party arbiter where I'm like, okay, well, I only have this much space for this type of thing. So what am I going to keep? What am I going to get rid of so that it fits in this space? And it is still tough, but it does really, really help to just have that sort of unbiased, like, okay, I have this much space for this thing, and so I need to make my decisions based on that. Minimalist practice number 8, when you are organizing, think about what you realistically need to maintain your system. So here is what I'm trying to help you avoid with this practice. A lot of times we know where things need to go and we just sort of chalk those things full of stuff. We don't really think about how it will be to pull it out. We don't think about how it will be for us to find it later, like in 6 months when we need to go find that thing we don't use very often, or for other people to find it. And obviously you're going to make mistakes on this. I make mistakes on this all the time. But whenever you can, think about the usability of your space as you are organizing, right? Like, you want things to be easy to pull out. You want things to be easy to find. You want things to be grouped together, but not jumbled together in a way that you have to dig for too long in order to find something. You don't want things to be so squeezed in tightly that it's hard to pull them out. And I could go on. Letting your system do the work for you only works if you understand that there are limits to the amount of space that you can have, that you don't just reshuffle things different places, and that you are really conscious of how it will be to use the areas that you've laid out in your house. And thinking about what you can realistically do to maintain the system also applies to how easy is it to clean? How easy is it to keep organized? Do you have to keep restacking things a certain way or stacking things inside each other? Obviously, some of that is unavoidable, and I certainly do that in my house as well. But try to limit that as much as possible, especially if you look at it and go, I am not going to keep up with this for more than a couple of weeks, because then at that point you need to figure out either, hey, I need a bigger container, or I need to get rid of some things so that I have space to just keep these in a way that will be easy for me to maintain this system. And all of that is a lot easier when you incorporate practice number 9, that is to value having empty space. I feel like this is about as classic minimalism as it gets. But I remember reading one of Gretchen Rubin's books, and I can't remember which, because I've read quite a few, but where she talked about just the joy of having an empty shelf in her house, the possibility that it entailed, just the happiness that she got from looking at a completely clear shelf. And I guess I do have clear shelves in my house. I can't say that they bring me the same amount of joy, but I do understand what she meant, where I want things to be spaced out. I want things to have room to breathe. I want room to breathe, and I want my things to reflect that. And so the more that you can appreciate and value having empty space and not trying to fill every single nook and cranny with things, the more that you're going to be able to let things go when you notice your systems and containers are getting too crowded. And then the final minimalist practice, which is related to the last few that we've been talking about, is to consider the amount of inconvenience or hassle that keeping something entails. So for example, when you look at something and you kind of want to keep it, but you're not sure if you should get rid of it because you don't use it very often, think about the amount of inconvenience versus convenience that it adds to your life. A lot of times we only think about the ways that things that we own help us, right? I think the place that I do this the most is the kitchen. I'll go oh, I have this very specific one-use tool and it helps me so much when I do that task. But maybe I only do that task once every 3 months, once every 6 months, and there are other ways that I can do it. In the meantime, that thing is taking up space in a drawer or on a shelf or in a cupboard, and I have to move it out of the way every single time I want to get to the tools that I actually use every day, multiple times a day. There's nothing wrong with keeping things for specific purposes, but when I'm thinking about whether or not to get rid of that special one-use item, what I need to think about is it worth the hassle? Is it worth the inconvenience of storing it, keeping it up, keeping it clean? All of those things. Does it enrich my life enough to justify keeping it? Or do I need to declutter it and simplify my life? And yes, I might have a few moments of hassle here and there, but it's not going to compare to just the minutia of it always being in the way or always getting dirty or always just being difficult to clean. All of those things are worth considering because the amount of things that we own definitely wears on our time, it wears on our attention, it wears on our executive functioning and ability to do things. And so I just feel like that is a very key minimalist practice to keep in mind, to think about the actual inconvenience of simply owning something that you don't use, but keeping it in your space. And that's it. Those are my 10 key minimalist practices for an organized, functional home. If any of these super helped you, I would love to hear about it in the comments. And if you would like to watch a little bit more of my minimalism content, I recommend this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!